he was pretty much handed a death sentence, really.
3 days.
Yeah.
3 days he was given, yeah. Well, almost a week, they said at most. So, yeah, to see him sitting there in a suit, it's, yeah, it's nice, it's nice.
And what age was he when he got that diagnosis?
14.
14.
Yeah.
So he was actually in a hospice, wasn't he?
Yes, we were sent to a hospice. He was on palliative care. They'd withdrawn all of conventional medicines. And, yeah, he was 3 days, they told us, once we moved him there. And obviously, yeah.
So, Callie, what made you research cannabis or even think about it?
Initially, I started to look into alternatives probably about 6 months previously because Deryn had a plethora of things wrong with him and nothing seemed to be working. So I started to look at alternatives and cannabis just kept coming up. But the things I was reading was cannabis and cancer. Now, Deryn didn't have cancer at the time.
Yeah, let's just explain that, because he's had a very rare form.
Yes.
Your book is called The Boy in 7 Billion.
Yes.
Because the cancer he had was so rare, and he was the youngest, I think, person to have that form of cancer.
Yeah.
And so he'd had lots of treatment, he had bone marrow transplants.
Yeah.
But he didn't have cancer at this point.
No.
He had infection and his immune system had
this was a failed bone marrow transplant. So they told us that nobody ever engrafts after 50 days, and if it doesn't work after 50 days, it's not going to work.
Had he had, sorry, just because we need to get all our ducks in a row.
No, I know, it's complicated.
So had he had chemo?
Yes, he'd had all the conventional treatments initially.
Because you were sort of against that, weren't you, for a bit?
I'm not a massive fan of it, but it has its place, and I'm actually one for a holistic, we've got to use everything we can to throw at cancer and any illness, to be honest. Having one thing and not having the other, I think is
But do you feel that it was the chemo that got rid of the cancer?
Oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Just wanted to clarify
absolutely. Chemotherapy got rid of his leukemia to start with, and then surgery got rid of his Langerhans cell sarcoma. So this wasn't cancer that we were dealing with yet.
Why do we not have oncologists going to the government, right, come on, you need to, legalise this in this very narrow field because this works? Why are they not saying that?
There's many theories behind that, but because of its illegality, they can't do the research, unfortunately, in this country. There's a lot of research being done in Spain. I actually went over to Madrid University earlier this year and met with some professors who've been working with cannabis and cancers for decades, and it's fantastic what they've seen. They've got the science there, but in this country, we seem to, because it's illegal, we can't. There's
so how desperate
but
were
I thought
you
it was legal in... Ruth, I thought there were certain cannabis products that are legal for multiple sclerosis sufferers, but it's more to do with the finance of them, isn't it?
It's GW Pharmaceuticals have been given a licence, so they're allowed to grow 220 tonnes of White Widow every year. Their drug, their cannabis, has medicinal benefits. Cannabis that anybody else uses apparently doesn't have any medicinal benefits.
But you can see the concern in terms of giving cannabis to children, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this
did
is
you
why...
Did you talk to your son and say, look,
yes,
because obviously it's illegal to buy it and obviously to deal it. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you then, Deryn, when you were a very sick boy then, when Mum talked to you about it, how did you feel about that?
Well, because I was on the brink of death as it was, I was up for doing anything because at the end of the day, it wasn't going to hurt me any more than what was already going to happen to me, so it was...
I mean, you were already discussing your funeral arrangements.
Yeah, I'd already planned most of it, yeah.
Did you worry about your mum, though, doing something that was illegal?
Not really, because, quite selfishly, if it didn't work, I wasn't going to be around to, deal with it, so it didn't really bother me, and if it did work, then... Yeah. It's fine.
I'd have to ask Callie, could you describe the desperation that a parent feels? Because, I mean, again, I can identify with you, but, when your child, you actually would do anything. It's a very, very hard position to be in.
Yeah, I mean, everything had been taken away. There was no conventional treatment now, and it literally... I mean, I had another test done, actually, nearer the end, and I said, look, he's still here. I need the test doing to tell me that he is definitely dying. And they did the test and said there's nothing in his bone marrow, that's it, and the words were, something will get him. And you don't want to think of something getting him. And so it got to the point where I thought, do you know what? And I knew that I was facing 14 years if I got caught. If someone wanted to report me, it's 14 years. But I would do every day of a 14-year sentence if it meant that he's still here.
What differences did you notice and how quickly?
It was also, I mean, obviously the failed bone marrow transplants, we can't function if we don't make our own blood cells. And so he was living on transfusions and things like that. But he'd also said that he didn't want any more transfusions. So we were literally watching him get paler and all these things.
Was he losing his nails?
Yeah, he had one of the infections he had in his hands, and the pictures are pretty gruesome, but they are all on the internet if people wanted to see them. he had necrosis in his fingers, and they wanted to amputate his hand at the time, actually. And I said, no, please, just leave his hand. Can we not just do a neurectomy? Just stop it hurting. And so that's what we did. And yeah, about 5 days after I started giving the cannabis, the bandages came off the fingers and the infections had gone.
Did you tell the doctors at that point what you were doing?
No.
You didn't?
No way. No, I couldn't. I was terrified.
So you had
Absolutely
to smuggle
terrified.
this in all the time, really?
Yeah, it was in a jar under his bed. And there were a couple of hospice workers that did know, and when they saw it, actually called it the magic under the bed. And I couldn't. I was so fearful that, A, my children would both be taken into care, and B, that Deryn would now lose the one thing that seemed to be working for him, you know? So...
And where are you now medically? What... Are you sort of waiting for more tests, or...?
The only problems I have now are from the treatment. So I have high iron levels in my blood, and that's from the amount of blood transfusions that I had. And I have a bit of a dodgy leg, but that's from twisting it 3 years ago and it not healing right. So medically, nothing.
Do you feel like you have a bit of a time bomb in your head, or do you just kind of feel now, wow, this is it, I've got my life back?
Yeah, I don't worry about it at all. Mum does, but I don't.
Yeah.